Hello to my grown-ups, to my cool moms, my rich aunties, my fun uncles, my great grandmas and grandpas. I wanted to make a video describing the Kids Who Can methodology for you to let you know and feel safe and understand why these videos are great screen time for your kids, that you can feel really confident with them watching, but also so that you can use any of these strategies in your everyday life with the kids that you have in your life to build critical thinking skills, resilience, problem solving, and also trust, respect, and belonging with them, which is very valuable for their subconscious and their conscious as they grow up to be adults. As I think a lot of us are finding for ourselves, our childhood, the way we were taught to, the way that we interact, has created so much of who we are as adults. And so we want to, in a not high pressure way, be able to also create those experiences, of course, for kids. So in this first unit on YouTube, it's called Snow Day. There were 4 videos. And in these videos, what we do is we look at a question, we mine our own brains, we do some research, then we deepen our ideas, then we relate deeper to that scenario. Then we do the fun of conducting our own research. And then even after there, we continue to ask questions and take it even deeper in our understanding to relate even wider to the world on a larger scale. So in this video, I'm going to describe why did I even pick the topic of Snow Day? Why does that matter? And why is that so important? Because it actually is. I'm going to go over how and why I ask questions, why that matters, and how important that actually is. How and why I model mistakes and why that's important, which I'm going to be honest with you. Part of me was like, I know adults are going to watch this. They're going to be like, she made a mistake, because that's just what we do. That's how a lot of us were raised as children, to be like very specific about perfection. And I had thoughts about being judged for doing that, but I will explain to you why it's actually a really amazing strategy that I've used in education. I think is so powerful for kids and changes a lot for them in the future, how we feel about perfection in general and that pressure. But so I'm going to talk about how I model making mistakes. I'm going to talk about my strategy for planning the experiment, because that's something I think that is very different and very different than what you'll see on a lot of like YouTubes or in learning in general about following instructions. And then we'll cover the skills. I don't even mean like academic things kids need to know, because there is a lot of that where we're learning about actual science standards. There's quite a few that are covered. If you want that, I have that, and I can link that down below about all the science standards, English language learning standards, and or math standards. There's not really any in this unit that are covered, but I want to cover the actual thinking skills, the human skills, the real world skills that are grown and obtained when your kids follow this lesson and or when you use these strategies that I'm going to be describing that I created this unit around. So let's dive into it. So why did I pick this topic of snow? When I was teaching in elementary school, I had a curriculum that I was supposed to follow. And you might reflect on this and think about this when you were in school, about how it wasn't always very exciting to learn about those topics. What is so much more fun and what is so much more motivating is when kids have their own curiosity. And that curiosity is so often built or found or discovered in their everyday life. The idea of Snow Day came because I know that in the world around us, when winter comes, kids love the snow, they love to play in the snow, and they ultimately end up having tons and tons of questions or thoughts, even if they're not question formulated, about snow itself. And I know if I put myself back into being a kid, I loved the snow, and my favorite thing was having snow around. And so I was being very honest when I created that video, and I was like, I wish the snow would stay, because I really, truly do. And so when we are thinking about choosing a topic or thing that we want to create on or dive into, we don't want to just bring a topic. Just because Easter's coming doesn't mean we're going to talk about eggs. What we want to do is we want to look and say, what is my kid thinking? What is my kid saying? What is my kid interested in? That's how and where we want to dive into that, which honestly can be a little bit of an art, but once you start doing it, you start to see it, right? So you might have your child ask a question, the kid in your life ask a question like, why is this that way? Right? That gives you like, why does this butterfly have spots on it? You know, why is this butterfly orange? that could be an example of a place where you could dive in and be like, oh, now we can take this and start to discover it further. In this case, even with the snow, it might not have even been a question. You might not have had a kid or ever even heard your kid say like, oh, why does snow go away? Very possible that they have, but they might say something like, I wish the snow wouldn't go away. I love snow. And that is an opportunity for you, like, oh, my child is interested in this topic. I can say, oh, what if we tried to keep it? And you can then kind of nudge those things. But I chose this topic because when you choose a topic of interest, your child, the child, will be so much more motivated to actually do something about it. They will be so much more excited to actually do something about it. And so when I was actually teaching, I went a little rogue, or a lot rogue, quite often, because instead of following the actual curriculum, I would choose whatever the kids were excited about and then just teach the same standards on that topic. And the growth was so completely different in my classroom. So that's part of the methodology that I believe in, is that inquiry, that curiosity is the driver. And I've even learned that in the adult world that really matters. When you think about books like Drive by Daniel Pink, I read that as a teacher, and that changed so much of what I thought about curiosity and motivation and how we get people to learn. We want to put it in something that they are interested in, because that's where the application happens. So the second part, how do I frame questions, and why do I think that is very important? As adults, it's so easy, because by now we've lived, like, I don't know about you, I'm 38, I'm 38 and a half, a little over, I'm going to be 39 this year, and I've lived a lot more life than a 7 or a 5 or a 9-year-old. And so I just generally have a lot more answers in my brain, especially the things that they are asking. It's so easy to just provide an answer for our kids. When we do that though, what I want to be thinking about here, and the way that we question and the way that we answer questions, matters so much for the habits that we're teaching kids and the way the world works that we're teaching kids. When we immediately, when a kid says, why does a butterfly have spots? Why does this butterfly be orange? Or, whatever those questions could be. When we immediately answer it like, oh, it's camouflage for them to, I don't know, I actually want to discover that. I feel like, are they hiding amongst orange flowers? Anyways, when we give the answer, it does a couple of things for kids. One, it doesn't create this subconscious belief that they are the person that could have the answer. It subconsciously teaches the way the world works is that the answer is outside of me and someone else has it, and I'll get it from someone else. I bet when you hear me describe that to you, you're like, oh, I see how that is a thought that I grew up believing. And that, no fault of any parents or anything else, these are things that we've discovered since, right? That growing up and having those feelings, we start to feel and become aware so that we can make those changes for the kids who come after us. And so the other thing with that too is, not only does it not create the belief that they can hold the answer or that they can discover the answer, it shows them the answers outside, it also pigeonholes us into the responsibility of having the answer. And that's a lot of pressure too. And I think that's one of the things I've met, like when everybody hits that like 26 to the 35 range, like the most popular meme we're all seeing, the most popular thing that we hear everybody say is, man, I thought my parents had it together, but now that I'm 30, I realize they didn't know anything and they were just winging it. It's like we create that pressure on ourselves to think we're supposed to know the answer by that modeling happening of always having the answer. So in fact, one thing that I do all of the time is pretend that I don't know. Which, I'm going to be honest, when I first started doing that, was really hard. It was like an ego thing. I'm like, I'm going to pretend to this 9-year-old that I don't know this, and I should. Like, yeah, and it changed how kids saw me. It changed how kids saw themselves, and became a very, very easy thing for me to pretend like I didn't know a lot of stuff. And it did not change how smart or not I was, and the kids didn't think less of me or anything like that. But those were worries that I had. The thing that I discovered as I started doing it that mattered more than them being able to discover the answer or take ownership of the answer is that ownership, that autonomy, was so powerful and translated to so many other places. If you think about like this idea of, we want even like somebody who works for us in the workforce to take ownership over something and try at it and like discover at it. This is the kind of place where that is built. When we ask the kids, instead of saying, okay, if we're going to pretend like we don't know the answer, we want to ask them, what do you think? that allows them to be like, oh, what do I think? I have ownership over this. Again, a subconscious belief, but these are the feelings and the critical thinking and beliefs that we want kids to have so that they can go and attack these things as they grow up. But they're like, oh, I can find the answer. There's so much empowerment that comes with that. Now, along with like me pretending I don't know and them getting the answer, the other thing that really, really does is it creates a level of trust in them that you're like, I want to hear your idea. I trust that your idea is going to be valuable. And in a way, it also creates a lot of respect, which is something kids are not familiar with getting, because respect is very hierarchical and it goes to up only. And I think even in teaching or in things like that, we're always told to respect the people above us, right? Respect our teachers, respect our parents, which of course is valuable and true. I have always believed that the best way to get respect is to give it. And so it was a big strategy I used in my classroom, was to give respect. And one of the ways we could do that is to simply ask what they think and what their opinions is. It changes this hierarchy of our ideas and our thoughts and who has more important thoughts than the other, and evens it out, which I think is really, really powerful. So that's just a note there. So what do you think it is? Then what we do is we start going into our own heads before we ever look at Google, before we ever read a book, before we ever ask an expert or get an idea from somebody else. This is hard in my own personal life because your girl loves to Google. Your girl loves to read to learn, my favorite things. But what we want to do is it unleashes a different thought process in us to ask our own questions and to try to answer them first. What do I already know? Again, it creates autonomy, it creates motivation, it creates empowerment to think about, what do I already know? Not only that, but it unleashes what we call tapping into our schema. Schema is what we already know. And what that does is it builds better connections in our brain and strengthens what we already know, which is really, really powerful to tap into that first before we add anything else. Then kids also, again, it's about creating those thinking habits. They don't create a habit to outsource the answer. They create that empowered habit to say, I bet I know something about this first. And then on top of that, the last thing that I would say that I do with questions is I don't confirm something right away. If like a kid comes up right away and they think in their mind and they're like, oh yeah, the reason why the butterfly has that is probably to hide from predators, I'd be like, do you think that makes sense? Right? I would allow them be like, oh, how do you know? I would want them to sit on that to make sure. So often we also have this idea that the first answer can often be the right answer, or something that just feels like it could be right, just feels like an aha. That excitement of the thought means that it's right, and that's not always true. And or it could be true to a certain extent, but have so much more depth that we can discover. So some of my very favorite thinking prompts and questions, please steal these. They are so simple to make it very easy, are, what do you think? Instead of me answering. Tell me more about that. If they come up with an answer or a thought, keeps them going, mining their brain more. And then, what else does that make you wonder? That's all you need, are those three things to get that noodle going and to build those habits of deeper critical thinking, take the pressure off of you, and so many of those other nuanced things that really affect who they become and how they become adults. The third thing about this series is that idea of making mistakes on purpose. So in the investigation, I make a mistake. And in this time, this mistake wasn't made on purpose. This is just something that I did when I was doing the investigation naturally. Now, because I record this on YouTube, I had the thought I could re-record this whole investigation tomorrow and not make that mistake because I made that mistake. And I didn't redo it on purpose in this case. Now, when I was in the classroom, there were times I would make mistakes like that on purpose to get kids' noodles going. But I let in this investigation the numbers be a little wonky from the fridge and freezer and showed how they changed. And there's so many different reasons why this is beneficial. The first is kids need to see adults not knowing. They need to see adults not being perfect. They need to see adults trying something again and saying they made a mistake. It is so powerful because, again, we have this subconscious belief that the We hold adults when we're kids on pedestals as like the holder of all knowledge. And that creates, again, a pressure for you as the adult and a pressure for that child as they become an adult that they have to be that person. And again, outsources their knowledge to that. It really, 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 and the most powerful thing beyond that is to model that making mistakes is okay. Because while as adults, we maybe make less mistakes in certain routine things that we do all day, every day, kids are just learning. And when we just learn something, we make so many mistakes. And kids, and maybe you felt this growing up, we felt like we couldn't make mistakes. We felt like we did need to be perfect. But if it is modeled and made safe, if you make a mistake and you're like, oh, you know what, that's okay, I can just redo it. Then a kid, when they make a mistake, doesn't feel afraid either. And then instead of being afraid and blocked out and like not being able to continue because they feel like they've failed, they would just say, oh, I can continue again. And they would just keep going and continue with their investigation, their discovery, whatever they're building, whatever they're trying, whatever they're discovering. And again, you can see how that absolutely applies to finishing education. If they decide higher education or trade school or learning whatever their talent is and going into the workforce or being a parent themselves, that totally changes how they grow and turn into an adult. One of the things that's really, really powerful when I do that too is you saw, if you watched the video and you could go back and watch how I think out loud. Thinking out loud is the best way to model to your child what their brain could be doing. And we don't do it enough. Sometimes I even ask my husband, I'll be like, if we're in like a discussion or having a conversation about, I don't know, finances, what we want to do for this week or things like that, I will look at them and I will watch someone think and I will say, think out loud for me. Because whatever process is going on in their brain, we can learn from and see and get more information from. So it's the same for you for children. Children are learning what the processes in their brain could be and can be to solve problems. So if we start thinking out loud in front of them, and you could do this with anything at any time, this could be you just thinking out loud on how you're picking dinner or how you're determining what direction to cut the bell pepper in. Thinking out loud helps kids see how our brain works, and it helps them develop thinking skills faster because they're seeing it modeled, and then they can try it on themselves. The last thing about making mistakes and not going back and fixing that and not modeling that to be the perfect way is, and this is actually kind of a gripe that I have with a lot of even the people that I look up to so much that do experiments for kids and stuff, is that if I were to model the experiment exactly perfect, even though it didn't go perfect for me the first time, that means the expectation for the person watching it, the kid watching it, is that theirs should turn out exactly like that. And we know that when a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old is in charge of something, the chance of it turning absolutely perfect the first time is not likely. And so that expectation, it builds this expectation again on a pedestal, and when kids don't reach it, they feel disappointed, they cry, they get sad, they get upset, they feel less than, and we want to avoid that. So one of the things and why I left that in there was I wanted to model it how it would be in real life. The real life of doing that experiment with your kids is it is gonna be messy. It isn't gonna be like the perfect science experiment where you have the constant that you're comparing to and all of those things. No, it's gonna be messy, it's gonna be fun, it's in your home. And so I wouldn't want to show an example of something that is unrealistic to what would happen with you and around you. I even thought about like, should I take all the stuff out of my fridge? Like there's phony Negronis in there. I'm like, no, leave all of that in there because that is what it looks like. So I think that's really important. Part 4, how did we design the investigation? This is actually one of my favorite things so much. We designed the experiment together. I wanted to make sure that even though, of course, I'm talking to kids that are like on the other side of the camera and like you are right now, that they got to choose where to put the snow, how long the snow could be, because again, autonomy is the thing that drives motivation to follow something through. It's very, very different to follow somebody else's steps. It's very, very exciting to follow your steps, your plan, what you think might work, and discover how it does. Like following somebody else's steps can be exciting. This is another level of dedication to follow through on the one that you design. And so that is really important. It just creates more motivation and more power. And in a formal learning environment, not in your home, that was everything to get kids to show up. right? Like this is how I call it facility manipulation, how I facilitate a manipulation of desire to have kids want to do the things like in an elementary school classroom that I would want them to do. And so you could do that same thing in your home, but you probably don't need to. On top of that, following instructions is a very different skill set than the creativity, the prediction, the cause and effect, the thoughts that are going into to plan an experiment. If I just gave the instructions, I would be missing out on an opportunity to really tap into those predictive thinking, problem solving skills and concepts that really, really matter to establish. So what we do is we write out the directions first and then we follow them. And then we get the best of both worlds where they get to practice both of those strategies. But I really think when we have an experiment that just already has all of it hammered out for us, we lose all the imagination, all of the creativity and critical thinking that goes into creating that. Like that's the huge, fun, exciting step. And so I think that's just too powerful to skip. The thinking notebook is also a place I think where putting our thoughts down, writing down as we're planning, and I didn't even mention the thinking notebook as we go, but for myself, I even keep thinking notebooks in real life. I just went to an event yesterday. I have a thinking notebook for when I go to events where I write down all of my thoughts. I have a thinking notebook for Read to Learn where I write down all of my thoughts. Now I've been trying to put them all on an iPad so I don't have to actually carry around a bunch of notebooks. I have a thinking notebook when I was writing my young adult dystopian fantasy. I think it's really, really powerful to have a place where we can go back and look at our thinking, revisit our thinking, and keep track of our thinking. Putting pen to paper, especially in such a digital world, actually does change how we think and see things in our brain, which is really awesome. And then lastly, I will say there were points in that creating the experiment where I didn't give complete full ownership of the creation. When we think about very specifically like the age of the kid that you want to be doing something like this with, we want to make sure that it's age appropriate. So if I'm talking to a 5-year-old, their concept of time is like so not strong yet, right? Versus if you're talking to like a 12-year-old, their concept of time is going to be far stronger of like how they can maybe predict already how long it might take the snow to melt, things like that. They know I'm not going to say 7 days, you know, they're like, I already know outside the problem is the snow melts by tomorrow. So the experiment isn't going to be 7 days long, right? So in the video, I gave options. I was like, what do you think? 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? And so also kids, because their concept of time, they're also very like gratification of time. They're probably like 15 minutes. The snow's not going to change every 15. Like y'all will be so tired if you were checking that freezer every 15 minutes. So when that happens, I like to give options. Giving options still gives so much autonomy to the child because they still are choosing, they're still completely in charge, but it helps where those places where it might not be in their understanding yet to choose something that makes sense to give them option. This unit that I did, one of the things that's really important that I think that is really powerful is this idea that it also builds across time. We start with the idea, the question, then we dive into it in our own brains, and then we read a nonfiction book and get more ideas. Then we read a fiction book and relate to it on a deeper level. Then we do the experiment, and then we even stretch it out further when I travel to Peru and comparing it to the world at large. This, I think, creates a lot of different things. One, it builds perseverance in thinking again. And I think very much because we're going into a digital world, we are really in this place and space where we want the answer right now, and we need to be teaching perseverance in thinking because otherwise we're going to quit innovating and coming up with amazing things in the future, and these kids are going to be our future. So they are the ones who do still need to be innovating. They are the ones who do still need to be critically thinking, and so we want to create perseverance with that. So watching these videos and even doing them over days and coming back to that, having that thinking notebook where you revisit it and you can look at your thoughts again and grow it, and again building your schema, that background knowledge. It's like your schema, imagine for your child, is like a closet and there's different shelves on it. I've seen it described this way before. And it's like putting things on shelves that go together, matching, right? Like maybe right now your child just knows like socks and pants. And it's like, oh, then they find out what a sweater is and they're like, where do I put that, right? And they're like, oh, well, maybe it feels the same as a sock, so it matches sock, right? But then they get enough other ideas of sweaters, so like, wait, it's shaped different, so now it goes on its own shelf. So it's really like connecting and deepening those things when we come back to our thinking over time. And I think also like think about your own brain. Think about your own brain in terms of like going away from something and coming back to it with fresh ideas, just like taking a break and coming back. And really what's really important is when we are doing this, at the end of every video, we have more questions. We're always wondering because we want to stay curious, because that creates imagination. It helps us dive into more things and continues this pattern of learning. So this unit, as we're wrapping up this video, what are the skills, not just the academics, like I said, not just the standards, which I will link below in the description box, the standards that that honestly, all the units, I will keep it in this one sheet for the year, cover, but the skills that are built in kids are definitely curiosity and the habit of wondering, which is really, really powerful as we described. Critical thinking, cause and effect reasoning, which is also so important. We think growing that as we get older, and also resilience. It's really, really important. Resilience is a life skill that's not just academic. Like you all know that to get where you are right now, you had to not give up. And giving up is really easy when we're expecting all this delayed gratification. We're expecting just to get the answer right away, right? And so changing that, saying, you know what, I can try, I can fail, I can revise, I can try again, is really powerful. The other thing that I really think is important, and this is, I don't think, thought of enough in the academic world and the learning world, and when we're thinking about kids at a young age, because we're just thinking about like these skills. We need your brain, we need your thinking. But self-belief is really powerful here. And if I could make this and share a little bit of like personal story, I grew up in a very unstable childhood. We lived in poverty. I lived in an abusive household. And I realized the difference between, and I worked in low income very specifically when I was an educator to work with kids who grew up like me. And one of the big differences between kids who are underprivileged and under-resourced is often that they don't have these subconscious beliefs of, I believe in myself, I can. They often don't have somebody who's modeling the way, that the things that I've talked about that have given them respect or things like that, especially if, for myself coming from an abusive relationship, that definitely was not the adult-child relationship that I had. But I will tell you, self-belief made all the difference in me becoming a woman who has 3 degrees, an incredible, successful career in education, and then running my own business after that, and now moving into starting a nonprofit. Self-belief has so much to do with that. And these skills that these units like this, which is why I want to do this and share this, is so much more powerful than I think we know, understand, and give it credit for. Another thing that it teaches is humility. Humility in the way that it's okay to just not know. It's okay to just not know. And in fact, we're not supposed to know. And again, modeling that as adults so that kids can feel that way. Communication, sharing your ideas, agreeing, disagreeing, so powerful. Then also, like I said, along with that self-belief, the adult-child relationship, I think, is a really powerful thing that this builds, even if they are just watching me, giving them that I respect their thoughts, that I respect their ideas, that I trust the steps that they want to build. It really gives that safety and that trust. And I've spoken to that many times already. So these aren't bonus skills on top of academics that kids need. These are these skills that make someone a proactive, positive member of our global community now and all the way through the futures. These are the skills and the things that create the leaders that we want to trust and have leading our communities and countries and things like that. So these aren't just a happy extra. To me, these are the base of everything else. I would rather kids learn these things than memorize the dates that a war started or ended, personally. But so what I want you to take away is you don't have to be a teacher or an educator or a formal educator to do any of this. Like I said, it's just asking questions, giving deeper, and really just allowing so much more autonomy for your kids and just willing to discover alongside of them. And it might feel like it's going to take a lot of like brain space right away. If it does feel that way, just watch the videos with the kids and like watch how I do it and just start practicing it in that way. And also, you don't have to put this pressure on yourself to do it, but I did want to share so that if these were the things that you wanted to start doing with your kids, you can, but you can always send them to me and I will continue to make these videos for you. Every unit I create, every video I create is designed around the same philosophy that we're following curiosity, we're creating that empowerment, we're building that self-belief, we're letting them lead, and we're continuing to discover the whole time.